immense failure. So it's probably not surprising that desperation and inner child wounds convinced me that a quick rebound marriage would be an excellent idea. But not surprisingly, it wasn't. And 5 years later, with me and my children now carrying more wounds, I left. The love of my third child, whom we adopted during that marriage, transcends the regrets of those years. And all of that was so long ago, decades even. But with each proverbial turn of the page of my life story, a new chapter came with a new name. I knew 2 divorces would stigmatize me. Because welcome to Christian patriarchy, where men are celebrated for their conquests and women are slut-shamed for having a past that doesn't match June Cleaver's. I recall being contacted sometime after my second divorce by a high school classmate, and she was looking for the contact information for one of our other classmates so she could send information about an upcoming class reunion. She said our classmate's name slowly and sarcastically. And she said her first name, and then she added her 3 surnames. I mean, I could literally hear her smiling through the phone as she said Marissa Braxton, then Jenkins, then McNally, and now Priestley. Obviously, that's not her real name. And I remember thinking, as she said those words, I thought, oh yeah, I forgot what a bitch she was in high school. Not the person who had been married 3 times, but the person I was talking to. And I lied and told her I didn't have her contact information, even though I did. And then I didn't attend our class reunion. Years later, thinking about that experience, I can see it for what it is. That person is a tiny, irrelevant human, miserable with her own life, who found great pleasure in other people's discomfort. I also remember how loyal she was to her Christianity. That's a side note, and I didn't write that part, but I think it's important. And I'm sharing it here because it affirmed what I already knew about myself. People actually were looking down at me, and I was right to be ashamed. And as I think about the feelings of judgment that I laid upon myself at being 16 and pregnant, that cascaded into not so great decisions, I wonder why it never occurred to me to forgive myself and see myself deserving of grace and love. And that feels like a good journaling prop that I'll use for some deep inner work. Okay, sometime between then and now, I got it right. It's not perfect, but right enough to have just celebrated 32 years together, 8 grandchildren from our blended family of 6 kids. And anybody who has been married this long knows you don't do it without work. Really hard, soul-wrenching, soul-searching, life-changing work. And our story deserves so much more than what I'm sharing here. But remember, the vulnerable part I'm sharing today is lovingly embracing who I am by sharing all of this. All the parts of me, the broken, the silly, the insightful, the overly responsible, the irresponsible, the problem solver, the rescuer, the silent sufferer, the wise, the painfully introverted, also known as an INFJ, or if you're into Clifford Strengths, I want absolutely nothing to do with woo. And if you know, you know. And so, in case you lost count, that's 2. 2 divorces, 3 marriages, 4 surnames, and the last one being Kamstra. So there it is. But that is only part of my story because, like I said, that writing took weeks to write. And all I just need to say is I am twice divorced and thrice married. And I also want to share with you that there's some wounds from my past that have remained open for far too long. They have kept me from loving myself and believing I deserve to be loved. I have much work to do, and it would be an honor to take you on this journey with me, understanding that you need to prioritize your own self-care when necessary. So if you've been paying attention in this video, you will see that my why now for this story is only partly answered. The other part is the part about our democracy being at risk. Going back to those people who are willfully and wantonly ignorant about the SAVE Act because they believe that this act is about reducing voter fraud. That is a lie. As many critics of the SAVE Act have said, this act fixes a problem that does not exist. Even data from the Heritage Foundation, the one that brought us Project 2025, confirms that fraudulent votes are so rare that it doesn't impact election outcomes. So if election fraud is rare and non-citizen voting is even rarer, then what's the real reason for the SAVE Act? It's about voter intimidation and disenfranchisement. This intimidation goes far beyond putting ICE agents at polling stations to intimidate Black and brown voters legally registered and eligible to vote. This is about making the hoops this act would force people to jump through to prove citizenship impossible, inconvenient, and expensive. So now we're going to shift into what you need to know about the Real ID, because that is the biggest catch about the Save America Act. Many people assume the SAVE Act simply requires voters to prove their identity through a Real ID. That assumption is not only wrong, it is dangerous. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Real ID is a federally compliant state-issued driver's license or identification card, and it features a star marking at the top. That ID is now required to board domestic flights and enter federal buildings that require a higher level of security clearance. The Real ID was a direct response to a suggestion by the 9/11 Commission due to the terrorists using fake IDs and inconsistent identification procedures among state regulations. Now, the rollout of the Real ID law was very slow, and that gave states time to comply with its requirements. And in 2025, TSA enforcement took effect. That means that to fly commercially within the United States, passengers had to present a driver's license or state-issued identification card featuring that Real ID star indicating that the passenger had verified their identity. But here's where it gets even more complicated